organizers of our workshop.
Thank you.
Before I present to you the president of University of Haifa, Professor Ron Robin, maybe we should just do a kind of round table identification. So, Anita?
I'm going to start.
Yeah.
So I'm Anita Allen. I'm from the University of Pennsylvania in the U.S. I'm the vice provost for faculty of the university, which has 12 schools. I'm also a member of the law faculty there and the faculty of philosophy there. And I'm the incoming president of the American Philosophical Association Eastern Division.
Oh, thanks for coming.
Hard act to follow. I'm Jill Hasday. I'm a law professor at University of Minnesota. I teach and write about constitutional law and family law and anti-discrimination subjects.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amnon Lehavi. I'm Dean of the Radzner Law School at IDC Herzliya here in Israel. When I'm not Dean, I try to engage in property law, but I have very little time to do that.
I'm Michael Wald. I'm emeritus professor at Stanford Law School. I do things dealing with children in the law, basically, and I'm really delighted to be able to be here. Thank you.
I'm David Nelkin, and I'm the Professor of Comparative and Transnational Law at King's College in London, and was until recently the head of research at the law faculty.
I'm Dan Hamilton. I'm Dean at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas Law School. In another life, I was a legal historian, and I still have a courtesy appointment with the history department at UNLV. I'm here with my great friends Mike and Sonia Saltman. Mike, who are you? Mike is a great civic leader in Las Vegas who is helping build ties to Haifa.
Indeed. We finally met
Mike-
today after.
I'm Michael Saltman, Ron, and I finally met today after countless emails between and amongst us. We're thrilled to be here today. I still think that Haifa is a model for, I think, what the process could be in the future, but I want to learn more about Haifa while we're here. That's been my whole idea. My wife and I, Sonia, a psychologist, lawyer, founded the Saltman Center for Conflict Resolution at the law school, and Dan's running that program for us with a terrific faculty and staff. I'm a real estate developer by profession. I'm also an opportunist, so I look for opportunities to develop. This is one of my opportunities here to figure out what this looks like for us in the future. Thanks for having us here today. I'm glad we finally made it. And we've had many emails of exchange, and I'm glad we finally came to
Wonderful to
this
see you
wonderful part of the world.
And of course, you want.
Yes, I mean, ditto, and I'm an interested spectator, so I look forward to hearing what everybody has to say.
One is the honorary consul for Austria in London.
In London.
I bow down to her daily.
Hello, I'm Ben Spencer. I'm at the University of Virginia School of Law, and I've been at other schools in Virginia, Washington Lee University, and at the University of Richmond before that. My area is federal civil procedure, and I also teach military law.
I'm Paul Hagen. I'm professor of law at Duke. Like man, I was a legal historian before I switched most of my research to extreme competition, which other people call sports. And for the last decade, I've been the Associate Dean for International Initiatives at the law school.
Thank you.
Carrie Menkel-Meadow, sometimes of this faculty. I have visited here several times at Haifa. I'm currently a professor at the University of California at Irvine, which is the newest law school in the United States, which I helped to found 10 years ago. And I'm emeritus at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., and I do a lot of international law teaching. My fields are conflict resolution, legal ethics, international law, conflict resolution, arbitration, mediation, and civil procedure.
What a fantastic group. Thank you. Would you like me to introduce myself?
No, I will do it.
Okay.
So Professor Ron Robin is an historian of the Cold War.
No longer history, by the way.
No longer history.
It's hot again.
Wait and see. I mean, you never know. And previously he was a senior VP at NYU. And now we are very fortunate to have him as president of University of Haifa.
Thank you. I'm actually going to start with a bit of a downer, if I may. First of all, it's wonderful to see you all. But I
That's a
thought,
downer.
yeah, a little bit, and then we'll try and pick up a little bit, because we are at an inflection point right now in Israel as far as our legal system is concerned. I'm avoiding the word crisis and using a more neutral term of inflection point, but we are at a very fraught moment in our legal system here, and as I try to think why, I'm sure there are multiple answers around this table. I'm just going to give one answer, and that is it has nothing to do with the legal system, but has a lot to do with the nature of politics in Israel. Instead of politics being a space for the mediation of difference, what has happened, of course, it has become a space for existential warfare between different groups in Israeli society. And I almost feel that it was inadvertently promoted by the president, who probably thinks very differently of the system, when he described Israeli society as a series of tribes. And what we're engaged right now is in tribal warfare between different groups in Israeli society. And really, it seems to me that the major victim of this, the system that seems to be receiving most of the flack, is of course the legal system in this country, which is under tremendous pressure right now to change. Sometimes change is very important, but some of these changes, of course, hit at the heart of the legal system as we have known it over the years. And I'm not sure what to do about it. I think the subject of your seminar or your discussions has a lot to do with it. It's changing the way we educate our students. We pride ourselves here at Haifa is that we provide, we hope, we aspire to provide a toolbox of values that are shared by the different groups in Israeli society. If we take the law school as a wonderful example, here at the law school, we don't only teach a profession, we don't only teach people, Gadi once said to me, carpentry, right? We don't teach them the tricks of the trade. We try to instill values, and it's extremely important that these values are part of our curriculum, because we face a situation right now where the existence of common values seems to be fading rapidly from our society, and one can come up with multiple arguments why that has happened, and it's of course not only an Israeli phenomenon, it's something else. And as part of addressing this, we come to an issue which might seem to be mundane, but we think it's pertinent to the role of the law school at our university. We're now on the cusp of making decisions of where we should house our law school. We are seeking financial support from a variety of people to produce a building which would be dedicated solely to the law school. And it raises a number of issues. Should the law school be over here, where you're sitting right now, in this beautiful location, stunning view, but has all the attributes of an ivory tower? It's detached from the city, it's not part of the social fabric of the city, and it's engaged in the city, but it's engaged a long distance relationship with the city. Perhaps, as we have an expansion plan, of moving some of our university downtown to an area which is around the current port area and is very close to the courts. Perhaps that's where they should be, in the poorer neighborhoods of the city, close to where most of the legal profession resides, and being part of the urban fabric. Or should we remain here on the top of the mountain, which has certain advantages, because we're close to other faculties over here, and we can interact with other faculties, but we're somewhat removed and detached from, we're not, to use an NYU phrase, we're not in and of the city, which I find problematic. And so that's one of the issues that we're facing right now. We face an issue of our legal clinics. How far do we move forward with our legal clinics and engage in issues which are contentious in society? This has been a subject that has permeated the debate in the law school since I've known the law school. I was a faculty member here many years before I left for NYU, so I know the law school basically from its inception. These are some of the issues that we're facing over here, and how much How much of what we teach at the law school should be available to students outside of the field of law? As you know, we only teach 3 years an undergraduate degree, and we have limitations on our breadth requirements. And this is another issue that we face right now. It's an important issue at any law school, anywhere, but perhaps here more than anywhere else because of the human composition of our university. Where about 35% of our students are Arabs, or minority students. We seek also to draw into our university a group which is also underrepresented anywhere, and also ultra-Orthodox Jews. We hope to bring them into the system too. All of this makes the law school very interesting, but you know, we live. That is sometimes not a blessing but a curse to live in interesting times, we know. And I'm sure that will be part of your deliberations. And I hope things go well. I hope we gain insight from you. I think we need the insight of those who see us from a different angle. We're sort of down in the trenches constantly, really picking up our head to understand where we are, just trying to slug away. And so having this type of forum, I think, for us is extremely helpful and will help us chart our course for the near future.
Would you like to ask you a question?
Of course, please.
Of your Arab population of 35%, what's the breakdown of Christian and Muslim, and what's the relevance of that breakdown?
It's overwhelmingly Muslim, because Christians is the percentage of Christians in the population is small, and it's diminishing as Christians are leaving the Middle East. In any country you look at the Middle East, Christians are leaving the Middle East. They don't find it to be a conducive place to remain. Whether it's Egypt or Iraq or Israel, for that matter, or the Palestinian entity as well, Christians are just leaving. Although they are disproportionately represented at the university, way beyond their percentage in the population. And then we have another component, which you could call Muslim under certain circumstances, but the Druze prefer to be called a separate entity, although that's an offshoot from Islam, from Shiite Islam. But that's another group, but it's overwhelmingly Muslim at this point, and it's overwhelmingly female. I should say this too. In general, our university is about 60% female, and among Arabs it's beyond 60% female. And that's has extremely important and significant ramifications for the future of society. As Arab population gets drawn into the middle class, it's women who are taking the lead. And I think that's of some significance as we move forward.
Thanks very much.
Pardon?
Thanks very much. Unless you would
My
like
pleasure.
to stay with us.
No, but if there are any other
Any
comments,
other questions?
happy to do this. Wish you well, and enjoy yourselves. Thank you.
And I would like to introduce Professor Oren Gazal Ayal, my friend and colleague from the Faculty of Law. Oren is mainly specializing in criminal law, with particular emphasis on criminal procedures. He's very vigorous in his publications and also very much involved in policy reforms in Israel, in various aspects like detentions and arrests, interrogations, and many other regions. He's a very pivotal academic player in those public debates. And he will also tell you about the law faculty. Oren, please.
Thank you so much, Gadi. So thank you all for coming, and welcome to the Faculty of Law. I'd love to present myself as the host, although all the organization, all the hard work was done by Gadi and Karin. So thank them. Gadi was the dean when this idea was initiated, and took over organizing it with the support of the Israel Institute. So thank you, Gadi. Maybe I'll just follow up a bit on what Ron just said. The question of the location of the law school, which we sort of talk about and debate for about a year with Ron, because we didn't still decided whether we go downtown or take one of the buildings here in the campus, is not only a question of location, it's not only a geographical question, because really the law school all the time, I suppose it's the same in other places, struggle between being an academic, totally academic field in the ivory tower, where the colleagues are the people from the sociology department, from psychology, from social sciences in general, and humanities in general, and maybe even hard sciences. And the special unit with academic research, but very much connected to the real life of law. And just a year or two ago, we had an evaluation committee of the Israeli Higher Education Council of all the law schools in Israel. And this was also a very, very prominent part of what they wrote. They wrote about Haifa Law School, that is an extraordinary, gives an extraordinary legal education, global scale, and wonderful, but gave all the compliments which you can read and I won't repeat, but had comments about or had reservation about the standards that we apply. And the standards are excellent academic writing, especially in English, especially detached, especially theoretical. And they thought, and I'm talking about most of those members of the committee were not Israelis. It was Ed Rock that headed it from Pennsylvania Law School. It was Stuart Schwab from Cornell, Lucy White from Harvard, David Schitzer from Columbia. So it's not Israelis that wrote. It said you should encourage people to write in Hebrew about Israeli law and make a change in society. And this is one of the things we always struggle with. How much are we a local Israeli law school trying to develop our own legal system, and how much we are academics. We want to develop science, and law is just part of it. Location is part of it, and as Ron said, it's not that I'm not writing, I hope I do, but also in American journals as everybody else. But I'm trying to be heavily engaged in the Israeli legal system, and it's impossible to do everything, but I suppose because of that I'm sort of in favor of going to the downtown and being more engaged in actual legal research, by the way, of actual cases in the courts, which I do from here, but would love to do in the downtown. And the president of the district court in Haifa always says that he wants the court in Haifa to be university court, like there is a university hospital. He says, I want the district court of Haifa to be a university court, where research is done on a daily basis with the University of Haifa. This is a sort of vision that I hope we will be able to develop. Okay, I have many other things to tell, but I think time is running, so Gary, thank you again.
Thanks, Oren. Thanks very much, and I would like to introduce Dr. Karin Karmit-Yefet, my friend from the Faculty of Law and colleague, and without her we couldn't actually take off and organize all of it, so thanks very much, Karin. Karin is an expert on family law. She is a Yale graduate, and
women, the important things.
Yes, and we were very lucky to hire her. Now she's a tenured associate professor in our Faculty of Law, and again she would be very active during the next few days.
And just was admitted to the Israeli Young Academy,
yes,
which is a very prestigious.
And the Global Young Academy.
And the Global Young Academy, true. So
you know, it tells you a lot about Israel, right? He says. He told you about the Israel Young Academy, not the Global Young Academy, because we have a saying that says, you know, she's the best in the world, but among the best in Israel. So this is. So hi everyone, shalom, and welcome to Israel. I know that some of you are here for the very first time, so we hope to make it a memorable experience. It may be morning for us, but it's probably way past midnight for many of you. But I promise you that we will live up to the challenge and keep you awake and invigorated We have prepared a 4-day-long program full of goodies, intellectual activities, educational activities, recreational activities, delicious food, wonderful company, and a meeting with some of the most important and interesting people in Israel, including the first Arab justice to ever sit on the Supreme Court, the current Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the former Chief Justice of the High Sharia Court, the current senior judge of the Rabbinical Court in Tel Aviv, and of course meeting with some of Israel's academic elites. So we have much to look forward to. But why am I talking in the first place after the president of the university and the dean of the law school have greeted you already so nicely? I'll tell you why. It is because I cannot get over the fact that Israeli academia in the 21st century is still dominated by white Ashkenazi heterosexual men. Look around you, the president, the provost, the vice provost, the dean, the vice dean.
I'm Iraqi.
Half and you don't count. You're identified Ashkenazi and you look white, you're not dark like me. And also the same story repeats itself in the first panel. All the deans and vice deans attending are white Ashkenazi men. So I'm here to break the whiteness and add a bit of color and some double X chromosomes to the event. And if you hold on for long enough, you'll get to hear me talking about the really important things, women and gender equality in Israel. So please stay tuned, but until then, please allow me to welcome and introduce the person who made all of this possible, our one and only, the Vice Provost, Professor Gad Barzilai, a leading expert not only in law, but also in sociology, in political science, you named it, with international fame. He came to us from Washington, right, from Washington University, and he was selected by among all Israeli legal academics by the Israel Institute and entrusted with pulling off this impressive international conference. So please give a warm welcome to our Gadi, Professor Barzilai.
White Ashkenazi Jew.
Yeah, you also, right? Well, of course, you and you also.
I'm still offended by the Baghdadi.
And you always date women who look white. Like you don't like women who look like me. I keep track of his romantic life.
I'm his new girlfriend, right?
I would like to take this opportunity.
Well, I won't comment. Yeah.
Okay, and also acknowledge Miss Faye Bishore, who is our marketing and event coordinator in the Faculty of Law. Yulia Lishinsky, which made most of the correspondence with you. She is not in the room now. You will meet her later on today. So she was responsible for all coordination, flights, lodging, etc. Let me say a few very kind of snapshot comments about the whole idea of the workshop and how we see the workshop. So first of all, I would like what Karin mentioned to acknowledge the Israel Institute in Washington, D.C. For giving us a donation with not any involvement whatsoever. I mean, we obviously did whatever we wanted, for better, for worse. And the whole idea is, and then actually I offered an idea to devote the workshop for the whole issue of legal education. And I would like to say a few things about legal education. Trying to mitigate between localities and globalization. So I think that basically the whole idea is to talk about legal education in or amid an encounter between localities and globalization, taking into account issues of what is globalization. And I think that the American experience with President Trump does demonstrate that it's not only a specific locality concerns, but a much more an issue. Moving to issues of behind multiculturalism to national security and democracy. Again, not only an Israeli experience. talking about issues like ethnicity and equality in the context of the mitigation and interaction between localities and globalization. So actually, it's about legal education in a global, local issue. And obviously, I think that part of it is also to benefit from your insights and comments regarding what Israelis should do about legal education in Israel. And let me give you a very contemporary example. So as a vice provost, I would spend about 1% of my time, which is quite a lot, to deal with complaints about Israelis in American academia who feel that they are being, in a way, discriminated against or not really invited only because they are Israelis. Now, it's quite on the margins, but we do have an issue of BDS. It's not really more than 1% of my time as a vice provost because I'm responsible for the international affairs of the university, but it does take time. On the other hand, I had to fight against the Israeli government. One should admit the most right-wing government that Israel had ever experienced since 1948. And the government has passed an amendment to a law which allows the Minister of Interior and the Minister of Internal Security to prevent entrance to Israel of non-Israeli citizens. They can do it right now about Israeli citizens, but to prevent the entrance of non-Israeli citizens who are somewhat identifying with BDS. So in a way, we as Israeli professional scholars who would like to do research and teaching as much as we can, we are in a way besieged by local predicament and global predicament. On the one hand, characteristics of BDS, and then we have boycotting those who are boycotting Israel, so we are in a way in between the trenches. So this is obviously not our main concern as educator in law and society. I am a law and society scholar, but it's part of it. The other issues that you have on the one hand, society, which now about 25% of its citizens are religious, and among them about 12% of the overall Israeli population are ultra-Orthodox Jews, who have their own separate system of education, elementary and high school. There is a debate to what degree the universities should establish ultra-Orthodox colleges of education as part of the universities, and heretofore we oppose it. I mean, as a dean of the law faculty, when I was asked about the possibility of establishing an ultra-Orthodox college on the top of the Carmel Mountain, which will discriminate women against, because women are unallowed to teach ultra-Orthodox men, I said over my dead body, and I really meant it. I mean, and similarly, I should say, to the best of my knowledge, all the other deans of other faculties. But this is an ongoing debate in Israel with an appeal to the Supreme Court against establishing an ultra-Orthodox colleges which are part of the universities. And obviously we are struggling with lots of dilemma about issues of national security. What are the borders between national security and democracy regarding extrajudicial killings, regarding tortures, and obviously there is a lot of comparative stuff to digest because you have similar dilemma in the US, in Germany, in India. It's certainly not only an Israeli experience. Notwithstanding, Israel is entrenched in a protected conflict which started, one may say, in 1948, one may say in 1882, is not resolved yet, and no solution is seen right now as very feasible. you have the issues of the religious places in Jerusalem, and many other dilemma. And we, as a at least relatively democratic society and a completely free environment of freedom of academia in the Israeli academia, we have to face those and many other challenges. I was thinking and we were thinking that maybe the best way to manage these workshops is not to ask for papers, but actually to have a dialogue among us. And we would like to listen as much as you would like to talk, and also to learn from your own insights about those and many other dilemmas. It was the issue that I mentioned were kind of a snapshot, exemplary list. There are many other issues which I didn't mention. One logistical or two logistical issues. One, those of you who have not visited in Israel in the past, please drink a lot of water. It's very hot, and it's only the beginning of the summer. It's not the peak of the summer yet, and it's very, very humid. We have a day of tour in Jerusalem. We are going to be hosted by the Chief Justice, Justice Esther Hayot. She preferred to give her lecture in Hebrew, not because of symbolic issues. Her English is, I would guess, eloquent, but only because of time-wise issues. You probably know that the Israeli Supreme Court is deliberating on at least about 13,000 cases are being submitted to the court. This is a very busy court, and only the Supreme Court of Justice, a kind of our constitutional court, is being asked to deal with about 3,500 legal cases every year. Remind you, it's a country of 8.8 million citizens. So, but she would host us, and she would talk about democracy and education to democracy in Israel. We are in Jerusalem. We are going to have a security guy with us, and we don't see any, please tell me, we don't see any danger, but just to be on the safe side. In Jerusalem, I would not be able to be with you because I have an executive meeting and I have to have a presentation. But Karin will be with you in Jerusalem, and obviously a security guide and whatever is being required. Then we have a meeting on the Golan Heights on Thursday, which is coordinated with the Israeli military. And so again, there is not so ever any security issues. Whatever travel we are doing is often coordinated with security authorities. You are completely safe. As somebody who was mugged once at Yale and once near University of Washington, I have experience with safety, and I think that you would be completely safe. Those are two tools which we are doing in order to see more aspects of some of the Israeli predicaments, constraints, and in Jerusalem we also have a panel about multiculturalism, more in private law, less in public law. So this is it for now, and now I'm shifting to Dr. Tami Harel Ben Shachar.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Gadi.
Great, terrific. You know, they say that the more you say that you should all be calm, there's nothing to be afraid of, and everybody just, the panic kind of rises.
That's what I thought.
It's all very, very safe here. And seriously, welcome everybody. Good morning. It's lovely to have you all here at Haifa in what I think is certain to be a great conference, really effective and fruitful discussion. I was asked to chair this roundtable, which is really meant to kick off the discussion about the challenges of legal education, and we have with us
maybe you'll start by presenting
Oh, I'll
yourself
start by
because
presenting myself. So I'm Tammy.
we didn't do that.
Yes. Okay. So I'm Tammy. I'm a faculty member here at the law faculty. This is my third year. I teach jurisprudence and education law, and I'm also the academic director of the legal clinics here. That's me. Okay, so we have 5 speakers. This is going to be a round table. It's 120 minutes. The speakers are just here to kind of open up the discussion. So I've been given very strict orders by the organizers, and I will try to be as firm as I can. So our speakers are Israeli deans and vice deans from 5 of the leading universities and institutions in Israel. They will each speak 10 minutes about some of the challenges of legal education today in the global, postmodern, technological era. And then we will open things up for discussion. I will present all 5 now, just very, very briefly. They are all very prominent and distinguished researchers and academics, but you will all forgive me for not, going into detail about each of them. I will say their institution, their main areas of research, and because this is a global discussion, I will mention a few places in which they have spent time in either studying as students or as visiting professors, because I think it might give us some important input as to where they're coming from and their experiences that they are sharing. So Professor Ilan Ben Shalom from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem is Vice Dean of the Law Faculty there. His research interests are tax law, including international taxation, corporate taxation, tax policy, and also welfare law and policy. Professor Ben Shalom earned his JSD from Yale University and has also spent significant time in University College London, where he earned his LLM, and was a visiting professor at numerous places, including Northwestern University, University of Toronto, University of Peking, and others. Professor Amnon Lehavi is the Dean of the Law Faculty at the Redziner School of Law at the IDC, the Interdisciplinary Center. His research interests include private law theory, property law, planning law, international law, and local government law. Professor Lehavi earned his LLM and JSD also at Yale Law School, and his book, Property Law in a Globalizing World, is forthcoming in Cambridge University Press. Okay. Professor Oren Perez. Not here. Okay, so I hope he joins us. If he does, Professor Perez is the Dean of the Faculty of Law at Bar-Ilan University. His research spans environmental regulation, transnational law and globalization, torts, legal theory, and e-democracy. Professor Perez earned his PhD at the London School of Economics and has held visiting professorships at McGill and Osgood Hall Law Schools. Professor Oren Gazal Ayal is the Dean of the Faculty of Law here at the University of Haifa. Professor Gazal Ayal completed his PhD here at the University of Haifa and has held visiting scholar and visiting professor positions in numerous universities, including NYU Law School, Connecticut Law School, Michigan Law School, the Max Planck Institute, and others. Professor, and last but not least, Professor Issi Rosentzvi, where are you? Here you are, is the Vice Dean of the Buchman Faculty of Law at the Tel Aviv University and also the Academic Director of the legal clinics there. His research areas include civil and criminal procedure, law and geography, local government law, and environmental law. Professor Rosentzvi earned his JSD at Stanford University Law School and has been a visiting professor in numerous leading institutions, including Northwestern University, Cornell University, and the International Institute for the Sociology of Law in Onati, Spain. Okay, so great. So we'll go around the table. Ilan, would you like to begin?
No, I think I'll.
Okay, so maybe Amnon?
Sure.
Great. So Amnon Lehavi, Ilan, you have a presentation?
Yeah, I think so.
Right, so but no one else. Okay, so good. So let's start.
Not a presentation, a few slides.
A few slides. Great. Okay, so Professor Amnon Lehavi, please, IDC.
So good morning. First, thank you to Gadi Barzilai to Karin Komitievet for organizing this important panel. Thank you, Tami, for chairing it. So I want to touch on three types of challenges that law schools face nowadays in legal education, and how the Razner Law School at IDC Herzliya tries to meet them as an Israeli law school, and more particularly as a private law school, like many of our U.S. counterparts are represented here today. So I'd like to talk about interdisciplinarity, globalization, and social commitment. So a few words about interdisciplinarity. Not surprisingly, it's part of the DNA of IDC Herzliya, Interdisciplinary Center Herzliya. It has been a pedagogic and intellectual principle that guided our law school from its inception. Actually, our law school requires all of our students to engage in a double degree program, combining legal studies with a full-fledged degree program in another academic discipline. At the moment, it's either business administration, financial economics, government, and psychology. So it's the social sciences, basically. Now, obviously, in the age of the fourth technological revolution, so to speak, we have to take a significant step forward, and we are still in the process of thinking about the role of practicing law, researching law, and teaching law in an age of rapid technological changes. So everybody talks nowadays about big data, right? It's probably the biggest catchphrase in higher education nowadays. But we really have to think seriously about what it is that we should teach at law schools, what we are currently able to teach, and what we should do to close the gap so as to really move legal education forward. Now, one thing that we did at the Razner Law School is to establish the Tzvi Meitar Institute for Legal Implications of Emerging Technologies, recruiting a faculty member holding a PhD in genetics from Yale University and a JD from the University of California, Berkeley. And the institute focuses on disruptive technologies, nanotechnology, 3D printing, autonomous robotics, telemedicine, and synthetic biology, and students are actively involved in the Tzvi Meitar Institute through the year-long campus-wide Tzvi Meitar Emerging Technologies program, which affords a select group of students the opportunity to engage with industry leaders, high-ranking government officials, and the public at large. Now, importantly, I think, despite the overwhelming enthusiasm about linking the study of law to technology and the hard sciences, we should definitely not abandon the previous generation of the interdisciplinary study of law, namely in conjunction with various disciplines of social sciences and the humanities. So the first challenges that I'd like to flesh out is really how do we seek to promote interdisciplinary in an age where technology and science loom large over the entire business of university. Second point is globalization. Let me say that Razner Law School places strong emphasis on internalization and globalization. It is a founding member of a body called the Law Schools Global League, LSGL. The league brings together 30 leading law schools from around the globe, united in a mission to promote research and legal education in the year of globalization. And the league, speaking about students, the league offers an annual summer program for students in participating schools, with the courses focusing on various aspects of law and globalization, each course taught by at least 2 professors from different legal systems. And to promote further legal education, every year the Razner Law School hosts about 25 visiting professors. So here is one example, David Nelken, sitting over here, from leading universities around the world to teach condensed legal courses in English. Each student, regardless of her or his proficiency in English, and this is a very important point, I think, which goes back to the comments made by Gadi and by Karin. Obviously, the body of students in Israel is very heterogeneous. And what we wanted to avoid, at least at IDC Herzliya, is the self-selection process where only the students with high level of English proficiency would take elective courses in English. So we actually require all of our students, regardless of his or her proficiency in English, to take courses in English. And I always tell my California friends, think about requiring all students to take a legal course in Spanish. That would be quite a challenge, and we try to meet the challenge. And I think, generally thinking, when you think about the prominent position of Israeli law schools on the global stage, I think that much of it is due to the fact that between the 5 law schools represented here today, we host over 100 visiting professors from across the world. So if you try to think why is it that Israeli law schools are so present despite the small size of Israel? I think we tend to reach out to the global community, and I think that the 5 law schools represented here are doing a great job. That said, I think that we have to be modest and to say that the aspiration for global legal education has its limits. The practice of law is still governed by national state exams and national bars, and the feasibility of moving across borders to practice law is constrained in many other ways. One example, the increasing cost of LLM programs in the United States, which in some states is a prerequisite for taking the state bar exam, is one example of the obstacles that law graduates from Israel and elsewhere face in seeking to practice law in the U.S. So it's been quite some time since, Issy and Ilan and myself have gone to the United States, but from what I gather, the cost of doing an LLM and an FJD have increased tremendously. It is an obstacle, especially for the less well-to-do students. And one solution that you may want to consider, or we may want to consider, is to think about joint JD LLB programs for law schools located in the United States and Israel, which will include certain online models taught by faculty on both sides. And the second main obstacle is actually convincing national regulators, especially the bar, to allow graduates to take the 2 or more bar exams. So this is probably one way to alleviate the obstacles of global legal education. My final point is about social commitment. So some of us, I guess, will talk about legal aid clinics. I should say that Rajner Law School has 14 legal aid clinics. I should also say that over the past 2 years, we've opened 4 new clinics. One is an anti-hate clinic, named after the late Shira Banki, a 16-year-old girl who was murdered during the Gay Pride Parade in Jerusalem in 2015. We also have the Clinic for Personal Community Assistance, which combines legal aid with psychological treatment, the Clinic for Housing Right and Urban Development, and our most recent labor law clinic for underprivileged employees. So we do our fair share with legal aid clinics. But honestly, I think that our societal role cannot boil down only to legal aid clinics. And this goes back to some of the comments that the president of the University of Haifa just said at the opening remarks. In some respects, the role of law in society, and the role of law schools in particular, is coming under pressure in Israeli society, and probably also in other countries around us. The commitment to the rule of law is never self-evident, and I should say that I'm a little bit concerned with the ways in which some politicians and other public trendsetters advocate suspicion and even hostility toward the rule of law as a binding principle, together with the view that law gets in the way of effective public decision-making. I think that there's some favorable view toward the rule of law in general, and particularly to the role of judicial review, the preservation of the freedom of speech as a fundamental human right, or law enforcement activities aiding combating political corruption, is unwarranted regardless of whether one is located at the right or left part of the political spectrum. Unfortunately, I should say, the Israeli bar has taken upon itself to guard against of the guilt. They explicitly use the term guilt, and to discourage the study of law. The point that all of us have to promote is that society needs lawyers, not only to provide legal services, but also to promote the rule of law and commitment to democracy. We, as law schools, have a particularly important role in convincing the public that legal education is a public good, even if many of those studying law will not end up practicing law. Needless to say, our academic standards have to be high, and law schools must be selective in admitting candidates. That said, a world without competent lawyers, both those working in the public service and private practitioners, is one in which power, political and physical, may be unhindered and unchecked. Vibrant democracies need strong, independent-minded lawyers. For these purposes, they need strong, independent-minded law schools that provide unfettered legal education. So these are my opening remarks.
Thank you very much. Okay. Professor Rosenzweig, please.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm always happy to come back to Haifa, where I started teaching in Israel. So
yes, I was going to say that this is one of your foreign stops, but then...
Yeah. in a way. So I'd like to talk about two challenges in legal education. One is something that I'm struggling right now as a vice dean of Tel Aviv University. I'll get to that later. So the first one, the more neutral one, I would say, is how to teach, in big classes and still be relevant. Our classes are sometimes include more than 130, 140 students in the incoming class, and it seems that the way knowledge is transferred in the world is changing, in really dramatically. But in law schools, we have remained. It has remained quite the same since I went to law school. Anyway. So, unlike many, I don't think that online and virtual learning is the way to go. All right, I think there is something unique and special about the teacher and student kind of coming to class and see each other and talk to each other directly. Many things can be done in the virtual world, but there is something irreplaceable in the meeting between students and professors that has been taking place, since the invention of academia in ancient Greek. That is not to say that things should stay the same. We must innovate the way we teach, but somehow kind of navigate, the in-class teaching with new and innovative ways. So in Tel Aviv University, some 3 years ago, the law faculty implemented a big curricular reform. And this reform has many components. I'll briefly talk about 3 of them, and if we want to elaborate about more components or about the components I will talk about, I would be happy to do that. So one component of the reform is small sections. So with all law schools in Israel are struggling with the student-faculty ratio. Okay, we in order to be budgetly even, we have to take more students, and the university is actually pressuring us to take more students. And on the other hand, they won't let us, have more professors on staff. So this means that we have in our incoming class about, between 280 and 300 students, divided into 2 classes, which means a 140 students class. But we have decided that in at least one class, we should have small classes of no more than 40 to 50 students. So the students has an opportunity for a close interaction between them and the professors. So each year we take one else subject, be it contract, tort, constitutional law, etc., and we teach it in small sections. And actually, this experiment is hugely successful with both students and professor reporting. Everybody reports high level of satisfaction with that. And we pay a price for that, because we have to, with more professors teaching these classes, which means that they cannot teach other classes, which might be bigger. All right, so this is the other thing that we've been doing is courses with cross-legal subjects. So another problem that we have in legal education is that all our courses are built, or most of our courses are built around a certain legal subject, tort, contract, procedure, civil procedure, criminal procedure, while legal problems are multifaceted. And our students are used to thinking in these rigid legal categories and find it very difficult to think about the problem for different perspectives and different angles. So now we have several courses that what we do is try to cross boundaries and force the student to think about legal problems and not legal subjects. So we have, a course about the housing problems in Israel. So this has to be tackled from different angles: local government law, property law, tax law, etc., and not only law. Okay, the economics play, politics, etc. And these courses are project-based learning. So it's not a class in which we actually give an exam at the end of the class, but it's a project that goes, from the beginning to end, while the student, the professor is kind of taking the student's head by hand and kind of making the project could be many, and the idea that at the end there will be something, a policy paper or something like that. And the third is experiential learning. And this is something that the whole university is trying to implement. The idea is that a very good way to study the law is by first-hand experience. It's actually goes back to the apprenticeship that law was used to be taught, and such. And there is some there's something to say about this method, and what we're trying to think about is different way of experiential learning. Of course, the clinics are the first one in which students are actually working with our clinicians on real cases, and there is it's a very good experience for the students. I will say something about it from the political side in a second. But we have all sorts of other experiments, such as courses that we have with the district attorneys, in which the students learn in class, and then they accompany district attorneys in the work for several hours a week, just seeing what they're doing, helping them in a way. It's not exactly working on cases. They're more watching and learning by going to court with them, etc. This is new. What we don't have, and I don't know what to think about it, is externships. All right, I'm struggling as a vice dean with trying to think about how to do externship that are somehow guided and not just throw them to some judge or whatever and forget about them. And this is very difficult because I cannot monitor the judges that they're working with. So we're trying to think about it. We have ideas of I know many schools, both in Israel and the US, have externships, and I would like to hear about your experiment and how to do it in a way that's actually pedagogically meaningful. The second challenge is teaching law in a plural and divided society. So this is something that Haifa is very good at, and it's from the inception.
At least experienced it.
Deals with.
And Tel Aviv University has been undergoing a dramatic change in the composition of the student body, while in the past, and not the distant past, 4 or 5 years ago, only 3 to 5% of the student body were Arab. Now, every incoming class, we have 20% Arab students. And this is something we've been working to achieve for a long time. We're very, very proud of it, very happy about it, but it brings with it some challenges. One challenge is how to bring these very smart young men and women who are less fluent in Hebrew, and they also, many of them come from villages, and it's the first time they're actually coming to the big Jewish city. And in order to help them overcome the language and cultural barrier, we have a wide support system, support net, that includes an introductory course that is being taught before the first year begins, that give them some advantages, they give them the idea about the tour. The first year subjects, they're being taught in a way, in a very condensed way, so when they come to the first class, they actually know something, and they have some advantage over the Jewish students. It's not a big one. We have a tutoring program, both in groups and individually. We have mentoring program in which each professor is being assigned to several students and meet with them several times a year. It's still difficult. They still find it difficult. The grades are not as good as the Jewish students, and we're trying to think more about more ways to actually close this gap. The second challenge is how to teach law, which, as we all know, is infused with politics, to a class comprised of both Arab and Jewish students. In some classes it's easier, like procedure. Of course, procedure is also political, but it's easier to teach it in a more neutral way. But if it comes to discrimination law, constitutional law, administrative law, it's becoming very hard. And we're trying, as professors are struggling with how to frame the question, how to frame the problem in a way that does not alienate neither the Jews nor the Arabs. And this is more pronounced in times of conflict as we had now in Gaza. So, and we know that everything that is being said in the faculty is becoming headline news instantly. All right, this is where we live today, and when the government is just looking for any excuse to part, academic freedom, this is becoming even more problematic. So now we are in the midst of a storm in which one of our faculty, Palestinian woman, after the Gaza events, wrote to her students that she decided to strike this last Wednesday in order to honor the Palestinians who were massacred by the IDF. And this instantly became, a huge issue and radicalized both groups. All right, so both the Jews and the Arabs are now up in arms. It's still evolving, and we're trying to think how. So, I sent a message saying, politics is good, and freedom of speech and protest. It's all very important that we cherish it, but do it in a respectful way. Well, it's still happening. And I'm not sure I'm handling it very well, but I'm trying. So I'll stop here.
Wow, interesting. Great, thank you. Professor Ilan Ben Shalom.
Okay, so I came here under the impression that I wanted to talk about what we're not doing so good, and not about what we're doing very well. So I will start with a disclaimer that I think we're not doing poorly in comparison to anybody else. I don't know if it's any comfort, but I think in terms of the university, so I'm going to focus on two issues where I think we can do better. I'm not sure we can do better, but I'll start with them. But I just want to make a disclaimer so I will not be, trashed by my dean later on. That I think we overall are I don't want to get the impression that Hebrew University is not doing anything. We have a very intensive mentoring program that is now going on across the university, with every professor is in charge of a few students and meets with them in the first year of their studies. We have a very, very interdisciplinary focus. About 60 to 70% of our students in the law faculty do a joint degree with one of the other one of the other BA degrees in the Hebrew University. And we invest a lot in affirmative action, especially when it comes to Arab students. Two of our deans, one of our former dean, now is director, and our previous dean, Michael Tariani and Barak Medina, are very invested in it, but not only in Arab students, also in Ethiopian students. We have a special program, and with Haredi students, which is also an issue given the geographic location of Jerusalem. So I wanted to kind of talk about two issues which I think are not really problems of legal education, but generally academic education, and they're just manifesting themselves. But I still think these are the main challenges. So I'll talk about them a bit with numbers, because this was not a full conference. I'll translate from Hebrew what the different diagrams mean. So the Hebrew law faculty is relatively homogeneous by some standards. This is the geographic location of our students, where they come from, and you see that they come from around different places around Israel. So we're not very focused on the Tel Aviv area, which is where most of the elite come from. We have some people from Jerusalem, we have people from the settlements, people from the north, people from the south, relatively homogeneous. This is from a survey we did, which about 50%, more than 50% of the students answered to. So it's a relatively good data set. We also are fairly, when it comes at least to the Jewish population, I think we're relatively heterogeneous. About only 60%. Again, this is one of, like all the other 5 institutions over here, we're all elite institutions in Israeli terms. And most of the elite is by and large secular and coming from the Tel Aviv area. And I think, if you look at here, so only about 60% identify themselves as secular. So comparatively speaking, taking the exception of Haifa, which has a large body of Arab students, I think we are relatively homogeneous as an institution in Israel, not compared to other institutions in Israel. But this is only by some standards. When you go a bit deeper, you see that we're not that heterogeneous. And so let's start with the first one. We judge for what type of first language we have, our students have. And this is the data. So this is Hebrew, not surprisingly, 90%. and Arabic was around less than 5. Now this is not true because we actually know the number of Arab students. They just didn't respond to the survey. So we actually know that we have about 10% of Arab students, roughly speaking. And also when it comes to Ethiopian, only one student responds. We know that we have about 8 or 9 every class. So this is not very indicative just so that's who respond to the survey. But what's the interesting thing here is that this number 1 ranked Hebrew, that's not so surprising. What is surprising is that number 2 ranked English. And Russian ranked somewhere number 4. Which is interesting because about 20% of the population, in Israel, about 18%, 20% of the population, the first language is Russian. And yet they do not come to the law faculty. So that's to wonder why. But it's something that is. But if you go even deeper, that you see who. So even though we get people from all around Israel, and when you look at in terms of education, so this is up to high school education, and this is PhDs, this is MA, this is BA. Fathers education, right? So it's roughly accurate to say that we have more students who have the father, that the father has a PhD, than students that the father has only high school education. Okay? So this is very, very different. So roughly this is about everything over here. The biggest one is BA, people who have, father has BA, number 2 ranks MA. When it comes to mother's education, it's actually even more specific, right? So the first one is mothers, the biggest group is mothers with MA. Wow. Which is again atypical to the Israeli society by far. This is the first challenge. And this also translates to parents' income. So even though we're a public institution, not a private one, and by all means our tuition fee is very low in comparative standards to what is the value of education, like all public universities in Israel. It seems like this is, when you look at who actually comes to study, around 70% of the students come from above average income families. So this is data, and I can say again that we are pretty good, like other institutions, in focusing on entry-level diversity. I'm not sure, as Izzy said earlier, I'm not sure how. Let's rephrase it. I'm quite sure that we're not so good in making sure that there's anything close to equality of opportunity, just because maybe it's not realistic to expect the university to make this big change. When we after 22 years of completely different life experiences, but I'm not even sure that we're making the effort. So there is a lot of effort on entry-level diversity. There is some effort when it comes to Arab and Ethiopian students on helping them to basically go through not to withdraw from the degree and get reasonable grades. But when it comes to actually who are the excellent students, it's quite clear to say that they all represent what is basically the mirror image of the Israeli elite, and we're not very good, and even not in challenging it, or at least not in dramatically changing it, not even slightly changing it. So this is one form of challenge that we have, and I think we can do. But we're not doing better. We're not doing very good. So let's. And again, and the other one is more, I think, about teaching generally. And so let's put it this way. We live in a time in which, we all, I'm looking at everybody here, maybe Tammy is younger than us, most of us, but, and Karin, I know, Karin is the same age as I am. We studied together.
Some information is meant to remain confidential.
So we studied at the age, I guess most of us, in which there was a huge, there was a deficit in information and a surplus of attention, right? So when we studied, we had these textbooks that most of us studied, many of us studied in the Hebrew U. We had these textbooks, and we basically we got these things and we read them because that's what was to do. We didn't have any other sources of information. It seems quite clear now that it's exactly the opposite. We have a lot of surplus of information, and increasingly it's the case with this generation, we have a deficit of attention, scarcity of attention. And I think by information, saying information by legal information, but also by pedagogic information about how to teach better. We have a lot of information, we have a lot of experiments, and it's very easy to figure out how we could make every teacher to be, even a poor teacher to become a reasonable teacher to become an excellent teacher, and overall to make the teaching experience a much more enriching experience for most students. But we're very, very poor in providing incentives, and that's, I think, the key issue. We are very, very poor for providing incentives for law professors to become better teachers and for law students to acquire the skills, the cognitive skills, the practices that they need to acquire as part of their legal education. And this, I think, is part, and I don't think that the United States is fundamentally different from my experience from studying there and teaching there. So it's all part of a grand bargain in which you, the students, will not bother us in doing our research, and in return, we will not require too much out of you. You can just look to the textbook and study law, because law doesn't change all that dramatically from one year to the other. But it turns out that in life there usually are no free lunches, and what the end of this bargain means is that we eventually will be replaced by robots and YouTube videos, and the value of their degrees is obviously going to be diluted, as you know, what we're now selling mainly, again, we're not different from any other university, the 5 institutions, we're selling reputation. You know, by signaling yourself, you made it all the way through to the Hebrew University, to Tel Aviv University, to Haifa, to Bar Ilan. You give us a signal. The same is true with Harvard and Yale and Penn and all of the Virginia and all the other distinguished institutions that I see sitting here on the table. So you give us the signal, but if we're not teaching you much while you're here, it's eventually going to be diluted. You know? And it seems like this is something that we're doing, and it's not because we don't know how to teach better, we're just very, very poor at providing incentives. And I haven't seen anybody yet who came up with a reasonable scheme of how to do that. I think it's maybe even more acute in public universities where salaries are uniform. So you cannot, but I'm not sure that this is the main issue. I think you can also do, I think it's something that's much more wired into the DNA of academic institutions who are focused on research. Again, I'll probably stop over here. So these are the two issues I wanted to talk about.
No.
This is actually news. Like
It's
brand
a new system.
It's all
This is how technology is changing.
This is disruptive.
Right, disruptive technology.
But yeah, we can keep going on.
Yeah,
while
we should keep going.
Tommy.
Yes, sorry.
Great. So, sorry, I missed Ilan's final words. Okay, Professor Oren Perez, hi.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I did introduce you before.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and I would like to speak about two topics. One is the intersection of technology and law in the area of research and teaching, and another is our clinical program. So in terms of the intersection between technology and law, we have been cooperating in the last 3 years with a new data science institute at Bar Ilan University. And this has been a very interesting experiment for us, first in terms of research, because what the research, the kind of research that we have been doing with them, we can okay, so the להמשיך?
שהפרושן יעבור.
Until we all boil.
נסגור את המזגן. It's better to listen to this noise.
We'll kind of play with it, okay, on and off. This is a
The
gender thing.
grand
yeah.
gender
It's a
divide,
gender
right?
divide. Experiential,
okay,
please.
so the research we've been doing with them can be divided into two tracks. One is data-driven research, and the idea here is to take on some of the methodologies of big data. These include both natural language processing and social network analysis in collaboration with mathematicians and computer scientists at the Data Science Institute, together with researchers at my faculty, And for example, I've been involved with the research using social network analysis with the head of the math department at Bar Ilan, studying transnational law and interaction between law reviews and citation networks, etc. Other people's, like Itai Barsimantov, Ori Aronson, have been doing natural language processing, focusing on various questions regarding constitutional law. So this has been one track of research. The other track is to think about normative implications of big data. So this has been ongoing for 2-3 years, and some of the research is now in review process. Some is still at an earlier stage. And while we were developing this research collaboration, which the main idea behind it is to collaborate, to create collaborative teams involving both mathematicians, computer scientists, and law professors and PhD students, we started to think about the implication of this new type of research to legal education. And this also corresponds to what we hear from law firms, new innovations in legal tech, etc. There seems to be that it seems that law firms are also started to think about the future. What would be the legal profession? What it would look like 10 years from now? What kind of new techniques and expertise we need to teach our students so they will be able to cope with the legal profession, the legal challenges in 10 years from now. I must say that we don't have a clear answer now. So we are experimenting with various ideas. So one thing that we've been doing is next year we'll provide students with an introduction, a course in Introduction to Big Data. And we also provide, we created a new joint LLB and MA in Information Science that students can take. But in thinking about, for example, the content of a course in Introduction to Big Data, we have various questions that I don't think we still have a good answer to that, and we had a chance to discuss this. Last week we had a big conference on big data and the law, and there were colleagues from Ottawa Law School and Chicago Kent that teach such a course for their students. And for example, some of the questions that we discussed were the following. So do we need to teach our law students also the basic, how to code, how to create a software? Or maybe what we need to teach them is how to use a package that will allow them to better analyze some legal text, or to better cope with the kind of analysis that they have to do during due diligence through merger and acquisition. So this is a completely different approach to how to teach a course in Introduction to Big Data. And while we talked also to people at law firms, I don't think they have a good answer to what is the kind of knowledge that they will need from their future lawyers. So for us, this is still a kind of, next year we will experiment with a first iteration of this kind of course, and we'll see what will be the response from our students. We know, knowing students, you need to motivate them, so you need to provide them a good justification why they should bother with something that is a bit different from the usual stuff, and might be more difficult and more hands-on than other courses. But we see the benefits from the research, and we also see that firms are moving to that direction, although with some hesitation and with a lot of uncertainty. So at least we made the decision that we are taking this path, but we know that I admit that we are experimenting. We don't have a good answer yet. Another short comment about about our clinical program. So our clinical program is I think unique in Israel in the sense that
it is obligatory for students. So we require all our third-year students to participate in one clinic. We have several clinics from which they can choose. We have an environmental law clinic, which I established 10 years ago, a family law clinic, a clinic for the elderly, and some other clinics. And this creates a continuous challenge for us, first financially, because unfortunately the Higher Education Commission in Israel does not support the clinical program in Israel. This is something that's a problem we all share. But it's also a question of how do we define the clinics and the clinical program. At Bar-Ilan, we have a very pluralistic view of the clinical experience. So we have clinics that provide legal aid and are structured like a kind of a small pro bono law firm. What?
Rachel.
But we have other clinics that provide a kind of a small research which is aims at practical problems. And I also consider some of them to be a small legal labs. So they they are very strongly interlinked with research that is done by professors, but they are doing it in a more practical way. And so we have a very kind of pluralistic view of the clinics. But it remains a challenge how to structure them in the future. So I'll stop here.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Oren Gazalaya, Haifa.
Thank you so much, Tami. Well, it's interesting to see how we really deal with the same problems, with the same issues. I'll mention some of the things that were said here and the way we deal with them, and then concentrate on one I wanted to talk originally, which was technology. So with regard to the Arabs, actually, I'll start with praising Tel Aviv for what they did. Tel Aviv did a huge shift in the view. It used to be like until 3 or 4 years ago that an Arab student that had good enough grades to be admitted to a law school in a university would go to Haifa. I mean, 3 to 4% in Jerusalem, 3 to 4% in Tel Aviv, but the vast majority would go to Haifa. We had about 1/3 of the students Arabs, like 3 or 4 years, the classes of 3 or 4 years ago. Tel Aviv changed it, and it's not like we're still most of them come to us. I mean, but now it's closer to quarter, and it's clearly when I meet even those candidates, they say they're thinking whether to go to Haifa or Tel Aviv. So it really had an impact, and I think a good impact, because in this regard, first of all, competition is good, but secondly, I think the schools should be more diverse, and I think Tel Aviv did an enormous job here in pulling those students, giving them the grants, giving them the support, stopping the beeping. Try to stay with the same intonation to see if anybody's listening. Like Tel Aviv, we're giving them a lot of support, and surprisingly, even this support is a matter of contention. It's not an issue without political problems. For example, should we or can we force them to take the preliminary course? We offer it for free. It's not a matter of money. And we think we should force them. We think they need it because their starting point with the language difficulties. No, we do not. We still do not, and we are talking about it all the time. We're thinking whether we can, and there's objection actually from Arab faculty member saying it's a sort of discrimination. You don't require Jews to take it. Why do you require Arabs to take it?
Do you give them credit for taking it?
We thought of that too, but it's also problematic because we don't teach them anything really new. It's the same material that they'll learn later. It's more like situation.
So they should be satisfied. That's what
We
we do.
call
in
it a
Esplanade.
course
Yeah.
for students whose mother tongue is not Hebrew.
Yeah, that's true. Of course, we rephrase it like that. Of course, we phrase it. We do not say Arab. We say students whose mother tongue is not Hebrew, and the mother tongue is dependent how they did their LCT, the psychometric exam. If they did it in Hebrew, then they are considered to be Hebrew speakers. It doesn't matter really. But still, we know it's the Arab students. For simplicity, this is the issue. So we didn't figure out how to solve this problem. Obviously, like in Tel Aviv, their grades are lower, despite all the support they get. And they get support from before they start studying until even after finishing. So we still give them all kinds of support that is uniquely for them. Also with job fairs specifically for them and other things. The second thing is globalization. I won't say a lot. I think we're doing basically the same. We have a global law program. We have a visiting professor giving condensed course in English here. The main problem that I do feel we have is encouraging students to go for a semester abroad. This is we have some students who do that. We have exchange program with many universities. It's a small number, and it's again not mainly a matter of money, because we also give grants for that. But still, very few students want to take that. I suppose it's language part of it, but I don't think it's only language. I think it's culture. I think it's the fact that our students sometimes work while studying, and of course, when they go abroad, they cannot work and finance themselves.
So it is money.
Well, it is money in that sense, yes. But but we do give support for the cost of living and flight. Of course, we do not give them. Yeah, it's my guess that it's part of what's going on. Last thing, teaching. So as Isi said, we also think about the size of classes. Our size of classes are much smaller. Originally, we have 60 students per class, 2 classes a year, so about 120 students a year. And we do still have this small class, but this time it's 20 students, not 50, for first-year students, for all first-year students. The idea is that in this small class, in the first term, every student has a professor that knows his name, knows him personally, because that can be done in a class of 20 students. And the evaluation is done personally, not through exams, but through other means that require personal knowledge and personal interaction between the professor and the student. But now to the point. Oh, and we have a wonderful clinical center, which I won't say a word about because it's because Tammy can say everything about it later. Technology. And the question how technology should affect academic studies in general and legal studies in particular is very complicated. We can start with things that are not necessarily unique for law schools. Laptops in classes. Can we tell our students that they are not allowed to use it? Few professors do that. That caused an outcry. But from time to time when I have visitors in my class and I go to the back of the class and look at the class from the view of a student, I see that Facebook is still on. They didn't all move to Instagram. They're still using Facebook, the old platform. So
shopping. Lots of shopping.
Lots of shopping. Yeah, I heard that's more common. But yes, the eBay and Amazon are also popular. So, and regardless of that, it's proven that when laptops are there, people concentrate less well. We don't know what to do with that, and should we ban that? Of course, some students need that for their writing. Other things that I try to insert into my class, and whenever I do that, I also do a survey to see if it works. So one thing that worked well was introduction of an online questionnaire during classes. games like Kahoot and other platforms that allows me to ask a question, give a case on the board, and all the students have to answer. And they are measured. Those that succeed and get are presented on the board. Like those that do not succeed are not presented. So only the top 5.
We have a law against that in the U.S.
Really? So they can. By the way, some of them choose to be a pseudonym. So some of them don't use the real name, which is fine by me.
Okay.
You have a lot of Justice Barak.
Yeah. They like the names of all the justices as a substitute. Beinish, Barak, of course. But that doesn't really matter. The fact is that this interaction, I think, helps studying, and I see, well, the students said it so I did a survey, and almost 100% said that this improved their studying. On the other hand, online courses or online classes were less successful. So I did several online classes, and I really invested a lot of time in them. It wasn't only me speaking to a camera. I added YouTube parts. If I talked about arrest, so I showed them a YouTube case of someone, a police officer arresting a real case that was filmed with a cell phone and was uploaded to YouTube, and asked them to discuss it, whether the arrest was legal or not, whether the police officer did what he should have done, whether there was overuse of force or not. And also questions that they have to answer during the online class. So it wasn't a simple one. Still, when I asked the students at the end of the term what do they think about the online classes, they didn't like them too much. So almost all of them said, well, if it's 2 or 3, that's fine a semester, but no more. We need the class interaction. We need the regular class. They said that they didn't study as well as they did with the class. They said it's more comfortable. Of course, that's not surprising. But they somehow, well, maybe it's the students that came to class, because I presented it, the survey in class. I used
selection bias.
So there is some selection bias, but again, maybe it's a good selection bias in the sense that these are the students that I should care about more, those that appear in class. And in any event, online courses I find, let's say a year and a half ago when I took office, I said I should have online courses. That should be something that I have in the law school. And now I'm less sure about it because of this reason, but not only because of this reason. Another problem that I found is in law, unlike, I think, economics, sociology, or other introductory courses, things change all the time. I can't teach criminal procedure the same way I did last year. So, okay, I can add a patch to the class, right? So there's a new important case, so I can add, but at some point, too many patches, you have to do everything from start, and that makes it much less attractive to the professors. We should think about them too. It's a lot of investment to have an online course. It's good if they can use it for several years. If they cannot use it for several years, it's problematic. So I can't say I solved the online courses well, but I would love to hear how other law schools do that, and if they do that in the United States. As for practice, we also debate that, of course, like all other universities. Should we offer practice? We also offer sort of workshops like that. I'm talking apart from the clinics, because the clinics in Haifa are not a course that is aimed to allow students to have practice. That's not the aim. The aim is to deliver social change and show students how to deliver social change, how to create social change through the law. So the social change can be through cases, not necessarily through cases. It could be also through policy papers, through other means, but it's not just giving legal aid. But we do have workshops. So we have, for example, also with the prosecution service, a workshop a bit different than the one in Tel Aviv. And it's new, and we try to see how it works. I'm not totally sure whether this is something that the law school should do. They will have internship in Israel immediately after law school. They must take 1 year of internship, and soon it's going to be 1.5 years of internship, so they can study it then. But the student seems to like it. Student seems to want it. The demand is higher than the supply for these courses. So for me now, I would love to hear more about the same issues that we all discussed, and I think we discussed the same issues, all 5 of us, from our colleagues from across the ocean. So thank you.
Okay, so because of the problem with the air conditioning, we will take a 5-minute break. When we adjourn, I will go very briefly over just in points over the different issues so that we can remember, and then we'll open for discussion. Okay, so now we're having 5 minutes.
5 minutes is great. Watermelon is also.